Yeah, I remember listening to, I think Pete Allison talked with Steve Gardner-Collins about the visitor economy. And I think that term actually, I'm sure it's been around, but I think, because of COVID, because we lost people visiting our neck of the woods, wherever it is, I think that the term visitor economy has become much more important, especially as we continue to live in this sort of evolving world. I mean, I think things are improving regarding COVID in the United States, but who knows? And I'd be curious to hear, the status of things in the UK. It seems like we will just continue to live in an evolving world, especially regarding travel, tourism, how we move around. So I think I'm so pleased to do this interview with you, Steve, because I feel like, you've studied it, you're an expert about it, and hopefully you've got a crystal ball. So that's the that's the plan. But I guess I have a set of questions that you and I've talked about. So I think this would be really helpful to sort of educate everybody that's listening to this or that listens to it later about where is the visitor economy and how are we shaping it? I guess my first question is, how do you measure the impact of the visitor economy, and what things are changing now? What measures are different because of COVID and other factors around the world?
Thanks, Sandra. When we were talking about it, and I've had some time to think about it since, visitor economy, as you say, has been catapulted into people's lives as a real important sector. One, because it was virtually shut down and came to a grinding halt, and therefore people's livelihoods and people being able to socialize was all grinding to a halt. People lost their jobs and they upskilled and they were encouraged to change jobs and reskill. So in a way, what we've had for many, many years is it's all been going on behind the scenes. Hospitality has kind of survived in its own world. People have been coming to hotels and going out for dinner and visiting attractions forever and a day, and it's not something that governments have really had to prioritize. People have been tourists, or people have thought local at the weekends and gone to visit places, and it never really featured in the top 10 sectors where engineering and cyber and manufacturing have all taken priority for different reasons. We've educated a generation of young people to take jobs in IT and manufacturing and engineering, and therefore the sector fell by the wayside. Along came the pandemic, it all came to a grinding halt, and then everybody realised that hospitality needs everyone's support. It's really important because it's about people and place. That's what makes visitor economy. It's a very emotional relationship that we have either as individuals or as business owners, because we're all about people coming to experience and visit places. So for all of us, it's really important that the sector survives, and visitor economy now has captured, whether it's hospitality, tourism, visitors, local people. We now talk about it as community. We now talk about it as business, and we now talk about it as government, as a kind of triangle set of important areas to focus on. So we all work together in a collaborative space and in partnership with various organisations to continue the momentum of recovery that supports the businesses and gives us all a place to go and visit and have some social time and see our friends and family. In a nutshell, that's what I've been thinking about over the last week or so.
Well, what part of the visitor economy is, I think, special to your part of the world in the UK? And we can certainly hear from others on this call about what's sort of local, but are there special reasons that you develop and promote and communicate about where you are? I'm thinking the Cotswolds, I'm thinking, Gloucestershire, but do people care about that? And have you been able to get people excited and say, oh, I need to go to this place because we have this special chutney, or we have this special breed of cattle that you ought to visit, or a special bed and breakfast? I don't know. I mean, I'm just curious how that plays out in the local community out to the outside world.
Yeah, the kind of great thing about the pandemic was that we all had to think locally. So we all became very aware of our place and where we live, and we weren't really allowed to travel much further for a certain period of time. So for a lot of people, they've realise what's on their doorsteps. And what we've been able to do over the last couple of years is really analyse what we have on offer and link that up nicely to attractions, accommodation, food and drink, and embrace a lot of what we perhaps weren't focusing on pre-COVID, because they weren't conversations we were all having before COVID hit. And Cotswolds is a very strong brand. It's internationally known. We all know that, living in Gloucestershire and working in Gloucestershire, and we know that the world kind of knows that because people have been visiting the Cotswolds forever and a day. What we've had to assess and really come to terms with the fact that we need business recovery for all of our visitor economy businesses across the area. So we need to benefit from having 60% of the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire and let that support and help those businesses in the wider communities. That supports not just the businesses recovering, but also family life, young people, a generation of change that's come about since the pandemic. And we've had to leverage our assets and then think, how do we make this work for everybody? So we're really using that as a tool to support Gloucestershire and the region. And I've been in a meeting today with transport providers and listening to the importance of all the partnership work and how it touches upon lots of parts of the network, so that, again, Cotswolds isn't just in Gloucestershire, it supports recovery in Bath, in Oxfordshire, outside London, all down into Devon and Cornwall. We have a powerhouse up in our neck of the woods and everybody wants a piece of it. And we equally need to, as a region and as Gloucestershire, take our piece as well. But everybody's now in a situation where we're all scrambling for a piece of a pie that after 2 years of staycation, we're all desperate to get to the sun. And we don't want to sit on the M5, which is one of our bottleneck motorways, going into Devon and Cornwall. And we've also got to assess, we're all desperate to go abroad. So we need this international crowd to start coming back and want them to experience more than just the Cotswolds.
Is there a two-way street? I was mentioning earlier before we started this interview that I have friends in the United States, and I say, oh, you need to get over there, not just London, but all of England, and especially southwest of London. And I don't have a campaign to promote you, but I mean, is there some kind of a trading agreement so that the U.S. could promote your neck of the woods and you could promote, I don't know, visiting, let's see, not Boston, not maybe San Francisco, somewhere where it's not freezing cold right now. But anyway, is there any kind of effort internationally to trade, to help each other?
Yeah, Visit England and Visit Britain have always been very good at connecting the UK and England and Britain to global markets. I know as a hotelier that I've had people coming to stay because we've had advertising and marketing in international markets thanks to the kind of Visit Britain, Visit England campaigns. And those campaigns are launching again next week or next week after for Valentine's, and it talks about reasons to visit the UK. We were talking about all the PR that we're getting at the moment thanks to the pandemic for the UK. So I think that there's a two-way street that, yes, the UK has its part to play in promoting itself in your market, but there should be dialogue between your market and our market so that we want to come and visit you.
Oh, come on over. I want to take a break from talking with you, Steve, to ask like Gamu or Mark or Omar, I mean, do you see a promotion of tourism and trade in the areas that you work in or promote? Anybody? You have to take yourselves off mute.
Yeah. I mean, the classic example, which Steve now knows because I've introduced him to Ulster, is Iceland, which they suffered a terrible economic crash in 2008. I don't know if you remember that, some of the older ones in the group, and the banks collapsed. They were nationalized. Many people lost their jobs. Many companies closed down. And I think it's probably true to say that tourism was their salvation. I mean, it was already pretty well established. but they put a lot of effort in. They had a big campaign, big PR campaign, which maybe Alsta will talk about if she's joining the group later in the month. And their visitor figures went through the roof. Now, of course, all that was interrupted by we know what. And they have been picking up because Iceland was less affected by the Delta variant than other variants, and they were able to continue their tourism program last year, although then they were hit badly by Omicron. But it's recovering, and they have a very good record of attracting tourists to Iceland. And the key thing for them is all year round. So people go to Iceland for the summer, but what they want is people to go there all year round, and that means music festivals in November, and you name it. That's what they want to do, to make it a year-round destination.
Yeah. Well, I remember when Reykjavik was, like a stop to get over to Europe from the U.S. Now, I mean, it's like a tourist destination. It's done such a great job of changing its perception to the world.
Yeah, and they've had a couple of budget airlines. One of them collapsed, unfortunately, but there's a new one just started up, and this will help to bring in tourists from different parts of Europe.
Yeah,
and America, of course. Very popular with Americans. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned this outreach. I mean, Steve, I just want to ask you again: are you familiar with sort of new partnerships forming, new ways of creating? It's not just city leaders or national leaders. It's also sort of the businesses and maybe the universities and the whole panoply of the ecosystem of a community that says, we've got to do something different. We've got to find new partnerships to get the word out. Are you seeing that, Steve?
Yeah, we've had to reassess the relationship that we have, particularly as an organisation, and work with the businesses, work with the agencies, but also look at partnerships that tightly link us to community and sustainability and inclusion and access, and really start to partner up with businesses that DMOs, destination marketing organisations, management organisations haven't historically been responsible for. But going forward on a more sustainable model, it's important that partnership working doesn't just factor in one element. It's kind of as I said earlier, it's that trio effect where you've got community, private and public all working together. I'm
interested because Aaron's on the call with us, involved with data, and I wonder, are there data and trends that you are monitoring so that, none of us do have a crystal ball, unfortunately. So are you able to sort of gauge, what to promote, when to promote it? Is there data that you can sort of rely on to sort of, change the face of what to do next? I feel like there's a lot of talk about, the tourism is improving, but how do we know? And what can we do to measure it?
I'll give you some examples from our perspective. So historically, all through the beginning of the pandemic, we were trying to assess the damage it was having, but we actually historically have never invested in understanding visitor numbers, where they stay, how long they're here for. So now we're coming into 2021, and I've been asked the same question. And then in 22, we've actually now got some data sets of the damage it did. We've got some tiny bits of historical data in 2019. But actually what the pandemic illustrated was that we were terrible at gathering data and understanding visitor economy. Moreover, because it wasn't being invested in, the sector was just sat behind the scenes. Everybody was enjoying it. It wasn't a top priority. Now we want to understand it. We now need the data to understand what the sector's true worth is. We knew that the visitor economy was worth about £1 billion to Gloucestershire's economy. Therefore, it ranks top for employment and from the infrastructure perspective, how it all links together with travel and food and drink. The whole supply chain is really important when it's all linked into kind of hospitality and selling and experiencing food and drink, for example. So now we need data. It's something that we're investing in. So we'll look at trends, damage done going forward, and we make some judgments versus 2019, but it's very loose. And all we can do really is look at 22 versus 23, 24, and be better at it in the future because we were terrible at it before.
Well, are you gauging numbers, not only numbers of visitors and also, dollars into the community, but is there a way to say, we've highlighted this asset, the fact that we have beautiful countryside and the fact that we have incredible specialty foods and the fact that we have, whatever those assets are. I did some work with Hamburg. I mean, they identified 12 assets in that city to do with events and festivals and sports and diversity and architecture. And can you peg some of that and use it going forward, do you think?
Yeah, we have data from the private sector where there have been they've been monitoring their ticket sales and their visitor numbers, and what we've historically had to rely on is more public sector data sets. But actually, if we work collaboratively with the private sector and merge and blend as much of all the data that we've got access to together, we actually start to see all more data that gives us some more representation of where people are going, where they're parking, how long they're there for, what they're visiting. But actually what we were told earlier in the week was, if you want to understand truly what somebody is doing when they're there, and you want to know whether they're a local, whether they're going to the doctors, getting their COVID jab maybe, or whether they're going to the supermarket, whether they're visiting, you've got to go and stand in that car park. We'll give you the stat from the machine to say that their car was there. But if you want to understand why they're there, you're going to have to stand in the car park, like they do at the airport when they're saying, you're going on holiday, where are you going, why are you going? It's the same sort. We need some researchers to be physically stood there. And this is where you go down the people route again. We've become so digitally focused. Yeah. It's limiting again on what it can tell you. So probably a good answer would be, we've got to have a blended approach on digital data sets, but also we still need people on the ground to ask the questions. Yeah. Why are you here? Because we're not going to really find that out unless Google's going to tell us more.
That's so heartening for me. Let's just talk to people, for God's sake.
Yeah, that's the bit. It's about talking now to the people when they're visiting, and visiting isn't just a visitor, a tourist. This is also just people that live in Cheltenham that happen to be going to the races. They're still a visitor at the races, and it's understanding the visitor economy as everybody, anyone, not just as a tourist or a local. It's a blended approach.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Gamu, I want you to talk a little bit about what's going on in African economies. That sounds fascinating, that there's a lot of change in the works.
Yeah, so I was just pointing out really that, towards the end of last year, when I don't know if those who are looking at the EU sort of, guidance on travel, a lot of African countries were removed off the red list. So that's when, and of course, most people tend to go to Africa because of the year-round sunshine, and safari, etc. And of course, tourism picked up again. However, it has been noted that when it comes to business travel, that is a major concern, and there's widespread worry that could this be the end? Have we completely lost business travelers from Europe and America, and North America in particular? So it's really interesting, but it keeps oscillating. Places like South Africa in particular, Southern Africa, I should say, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, keep going in and out of the red list. So there's, we're not really sure where it's all going, but it's a massive concern because tourism is a major employer on the continent. It's one of the biggest industries there. So, but just going back to what you were talking about right at the start, about promoting, or promoting each other, the UK promoting some of these African destinations and vice versa. I think that's absolutely a great idea, because everybody's sort of working up to the fact that, look, much more has got to be done. People have to kind of cooperate, and if we can't send people over, who can we partner with to help us promote, and vice versa. And you know, Tanzania keeps popping up to me for me anyway. Every time, you know, Steve is being interviewed, it's funny how I've just had a conversation. Because I remember last time you were being interviewed, I was telling you about hotels in Tanzania, and the same thing just happened earlier this week. I was speaking to some people in Tanzania again, and they, you know, they're basically like, you know, open for business, you know, and Tanzania is one of those places where, you know, beautiful beaches and things like that, but at the same time, it's also a massive hub for business conferences and things like that as well. So I think it could be interesting to see what sort of cross-pollination can happen between the two sides. There's definitely lots of potential, and there's a lot going on that I think, you know, whether it's promoting specific events or, you know, conferences or whatever it is, that would sort of help with both the tourism end, but also promoting business on the continent.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I'd love to see that partnership. I'm sure it seems like anybody that's in the industry of travel, tourism, you know, anything to do with mobility, moving people around would benefit from that. I want to turn to Erin for a second. You mentioned this need about correct data, and I wanted to ask you specifically, Erin, I work with a company that uses AI to sort of monitor all social media and see what people are talking about. You know, what do they think about what's going on with, obviously, you know, the changes in COVID and all those restrictions, but what do they think about traveling to X? And I think there's a way to monitor it through AI. Do you get involved with any of that data?
So mainly what we do is kind of Power BI and building. I said earlier about the way that you store data is really important. So warehouses and data lakes as well is the main part, but we have worked with AI as well. Yeah. But yeah, just building on Steve's point, the fact is now that they're looking at all this data they've never really had access to before, they're going to have millions of lines of code and loads of data. It can be too much at times. It's really important how you store it. You'll have your financial, customer, marketing, having it in the right place. You can actually pull out those key insights. It's going to be really important for the industry in the future.
Yeah, fascinating. We need to do a better job of using it. I think cities generate data, you know, every day of the week on travel, on tourism, on crime, on, you know, on energy usage, and yet they often sit on that data and don't leverage it. Yeah. Steve, I want to get back to you with a question about the future. I wonder, you know, if you were to advise an area, and you do that for a living, but if you were to advise the Gloucestershire communities, the region, what would you tell them about planning for the future? What advice would you give them?
I think the sector's been terrible at being for a sustainable outlook. It came to a grinding halt. It wasn't able to necessarily survive a pandemic without the government stepping in. The furlough scheme was a great example of that. Closing your business and still getting paid. To be more sustainable in the future, if COVID is with us ongoing now and we just live with it as an endemic, then businesses have got to build this resilience into their business plans by forward planning, thinking worst case scenario, pushing as much into the bank for savings as possible, not trading at a loss. There were businesses that should have probably folded through the pandemic, which has now come out as off the back of the furlough scheme and the grants. They were just propped up. Some businesses made so much profit from those schemes, and therefore perhaps wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for the intervention. So therefore, without it, how do you survive the future? And this won't be the first and the last time that something's going to happen. We've already Mark touched on the crash of 2008, another example, and unfortunately they do come round more often. So therefore, businesses need to just be more planned and more what was the word I just used? Resilient.
Yeah, flexible for sure.
Flexible. If they did swipe your business from under your feet tomorrow and you needed to survive a couple of weeks, how would you do that? And I think business owners need to really think about what would I do worst case and build forward from there, rather than think that it's just all going to be there tomorrow when it may not be. Right.
We just don't know. Nicole, I wanted to turn to you put you on the spot for a minute, because, well, I'll just give you a little side story, which is I live normally in Washington, D.C., and like every major city, the big tourist area just crashed. I mean, businesses closed, things were boarded up, not only for COVID and social justice issues around the murder of George Floyd, and then we had COVID compounding itself. And so, the whole community of Georgetown, where I live, really suffered. I mean, it looked like a ghost town. And this happened in big cities, small cities around the world. But I guess one of the things that I think people in your industry, Nicole, should think about is, what could we do to re-energize, to get people excited again? I mean, I feel like, well, we're all just struggling and we're just doing the best we can and we're getting by. And I'm thinking, well, where's the energy now? Where are the exciting events? Where are the things that would say, oh my God, I've got to visit Weston to see the sea monster. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but there's like this crazy oil rig that's now decorated as a tourist attraction in Weston. I mean, I think we need so much more of that. Like put a sound and light show on the big buildings in your city, or I don't know. I mean, I'm a little over the top about this, but anyway, Nicole, I'm turning to you. I'm just missing, people have lost jobs and people have lost lives. I don't mean to diminish any of that. I'm just saying, for those of us responsible for re-energizing things, where is that energy? What do you think, Nicole?
So thanks, Sandra. Yeah, I think that certainly what we've seen so far on like social media movements, especially locally, is picking up on maybe local charitable events or working with local businesses using hashtags that pick up quite positive themes in terms of what we're talking about, like support local or keep it local or things like that. And there certainly was in the county that I live in Worcestershire, there was a drive to support local tourism and leisure businesses by making sure that you retweet them, and when they put events out that you hashtag it with a local hashtag so that it's seen locally, because at that time there was only local travel. I think it's about kind of walking that line between being mindful, as you say, of those larger kind of life events that people have endured over the past 2 years, but also looking to a very positive future which can come out of this, and being able to sort of manage that. And I think that in terms of business and helping businesses to transition out of this kind of low phase, it's about supporting each other. And I think if we put the attention on supporting each other's businesses and being able to raise the profiles of other businesses' high profile kind of offerings, or maybe their unique position in an environment and they're championing something locally, being able to support that together as a community is a really great way to do that, because we've got power as a group, and especially on social media we can enhance our voice by working together on those kind of on those strategies and on those tactics. Right. So I've certainly seen some really good examples locally, and especially kind of during the pandemic as well, of local businesses and community interests working together. But then as in how we engage data, going back to your conversation about data, talking about quantitative and qualitative data and how we use that, I think one of the challenges that we have, especially in digital marketing, is our data is very siloed. So we've got lots of pots of data within the private sector, but actually linking them together to tell a story is quite challenging, because we've got obstacles and barriers to overcome, which are kind of revealing maybe some of those kind of tender areas within a business that some businesses might want to protect. But actually, if we share that data, we could maybe get into something really quite significant. So I think there are a few approaches to be able to spin this up, and re-energize the marketing sector. But I think it depends on what kind of approach that you take. Right. And, but certainly taking a supportive kind of community approach is a good way to start.
Right. Pete, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing all of your angles, and I just want to bring us an emotional intelligence side to it a little bit. And of course, we use emotional intelligence across all the places in the cyber and everything. It's really important. It's understanding how and why people do things, and I think we've got three really important pillars that are coming out here. We all know that, for better or worse at times, social media can create an energy, exactly as Nicole's been saying, but it can create a scene. It can destroy a scene as fast as it can create a scene. And it's a very valuable but very fast access, fast response tool. Used in the right way can be incredibly positive. Used in the wrong way can be incredibly negative. You've got that communications environment that we can use to set something up and set that as a launch pad into whatever we're doing. If that sits in a strategically well-planned place with the data understanding, so that when we set that immediate environment up, we know we're doing it for a good reason, and we know what's going on, and we know what the objective is as we move forward, and where we're trying to go to metric that, and also with the hard-edged real-world investment, because we can talk about Cheltenham being the best place in sliced bread, all we want, but if when people get here there aren't the invested spaces of hotels and bars and restaurants and racecourses and all the rest of the stuff, then frankly it's not going to last very long. So I think if we can strategically sit with those three things of solid investment, research and communication and understanding data, and then the immediacy of social media well used, then I think we've got a strong foundation. But they do all have to sit in balance, and that's what scares me a little bit, because sometimes we can launch off down one and leave the other behind, and it just takes the whole thing out very shortly down the line if they're not kept in strategic balance.
Yeah, very good point, Steve. Thank you. I mean, I think it's so funny that our world is really so much about data and social media and, communicating the right hashtag, for God's sake. But I'm sort of back to, and Steve, this one's for you. I'm sort of back to, what are we doing that's really different? I mean, you can't do the same old, I think, in our world today, because we have all these other travel restrictions, and I have so many friends that say, oh, it's so difficult to travel. Well, it's not much different, really. International travel, I mean, you have to fill out a form, like a passenger locator form, and you have to wear a mask, and there's certain things, but really just get off your couch and start traveling. But what is it, Steve, that if I said to you, what is a reason to come to Gloucestershire, what would you tell me? Just one or two or three?
I could talk about Gloucestershire all day. I'll answer the first part of the question.
Yeah, you could do it more broadly.
Yeah, so from a safe travel perspective, we were talking about this earlier because we've met with travel providers today. We've all had a couple of years where it's been restricted. It's been quite a psychological journey that we've all been on, to stay at home, follow the rules. Some of us follow the rules, but stay at home. And then to now be told you can come and travel again. And I've already been there. I went out to Spain in half term. The airport was so clean. The airline was so clean. I told all my friends, go on holiday. It's so clean. It's the cleanest it's ever been. We need to maintain those standards and show our stories and our experiences. The power of sharing each other's interpretation of an experience and a visit is actually more powerful than these corporate generic pretty pictures. I could, in my second part of the answer, in terms of why should people come to Gloucestershire, well, go to Visit Gloss UK, have a look at the videos, have a look at the stories we've shared. We spend most of our time on our social platforms resharing what people are sharing with us about what their experiences are in the county. I'm not going to make up what I think you would enjoy in Gloucestershire. We've been now for 2 years putting on loads of people's content onto our social because we've been resharing it. This is what other people have experienced when they've come to Gloucestershire far and wide. We all know what the Cotswolds looks like. Gloucestershire, in a way, doesn't look that dissimilar. The more you go out towards the forest, the more it becomes valleys and green trees. But generally, Gloucestershire is Gloucestershire. There's loads of different heritage and culture and urban and rural and new and old, food and drink, everything is on offer. But with all destinations, we've all got lots to show. And I think that if you do your research and watch people's videos, see what they've experienced, if you want a flavour of that, then that's the experience that you'll get, because you're going to book it and hopefully experience it. But we also want people to come and experience undiscovered parts of and tell their news stories of places that others haven't been to. So I don't want everybody going to the same place. I don't want over tourism. I don't want crowds. Everybody needs a shared piece of the pie when people come to visit. So yeah, Visit Gloss UK, And actually, because we've been reminded, next week I'll be talking to partners and internationally and domestic, all about the visitor economy, 10 a.m. on the 10th. And it's going to be all about international discussion on visitor economy. So we'll continue the conversation. We'll talk about some of the partners there are attractions and accommodation and domestic and international. So we've all got a perspective on place, people, and why you should visit. There we go.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. I'll turn it over to Guy. I just wanted to say that I think it is so much about storytelling.
Very much.
But I still think there's a disconnect between, you know, how great our place is and, you know, just getting people excited about it. I don't know. Maybe we just need to have like more parades, or maybe we need to have like people riding horses. Like, I don't know. I'm looking for help here. But anyway, Guy, what's your thought about all this? And thank you for letting us do this fun interview. I loved it.